It is now week 6 and it's time to take it easy. Hello again, I'm Q and I'm in the process of trying to learn digital art because I really like anime and I wanna be able to draw my favorite characters. This video shows week 6 of my learning journey, or in a different measure, what my art was at after roughly 60 hours of practice. In the last video, I showed the whole roughly 18 hours process of me redrawing one of my OCs from day one, preparations and practice and the actual time-lapse itself. In the weeks prior to that, I did the same thing for 2 different anime characters and it was a lot. It was educational in some way, it all helped me get better with each week, but not gonna lie, I was feeling really tired after those 5 weeks. Mostly because a huge part of the time I spent drawing, I was doing just the grinding type of practice, like the head proportions and color schemes or the clothes practice. Don't get me wrong, it's all very helpful, but it was a lot of hard work put into something that would only become enjoyable several hours later, or even several days later. For professional artists out there, it may be standard, but for someone doing it as a hobby, it was getting progressively less enjoyable with each passing day. The final outcome was always worth the hard work, but god, it was sometimes a struggle to get myself to actually sit down and start on the practice. I had a plan to draw the last remaining OC from day 1 in week 6, but after finishing week 5, exhausted and with my brain fried from overthinking every single thing about that piece too much, I threw that plan out the window and decided to take a break. I didn't want to step back from drawing altogether because I was scared getting back into it later on would be more difficult. So instead, I decided to just slow down and try to enjoy it as much as possible. There wasn't any particular build-up to this week's practice, so I'll just let the time-lapse play on the screen while I explain some things. I knew there were 2 major reasons as to why I was feeling so exhausted by the end of week 5, and it actually wasn't about the sheer number of hours in itself. One reason was that I would spend days drawing something I wasn't that interested in, if at all. It was all for the sake of the final piece, but it still meant spending hours on those practice sessions. And the second reason was overthinking. I may have had little to no skills at the time, but I was determined to make my drawings look the best I could. I had no idea about how lighting and shadows and close folds worked, but I would still force my brain to try to figure it out until my head was steaming. That ambitious side is definitely something beneficial in the long run, since it probably makes the progress much faster than it would have been if I was just ignoring all the stuff I didn't know. But it's probably also one of the main reasons people burn out quickly, and I really didn't want to follow that path, especially not so soon. That's how the new idea for week 6 came to be. I told myself that I wouldn't do any particular type of practice, I wouldn't devote myself to one specific character, nor would I stick to drawing only one piece. I told myself that for this break time week, I would just draw something smaller and quicker, something fun to work on, and at the same time something that would give me that satisfying feeling of having finished a piece faster than after pouring 10 hours into it. I also made a rule for myself. I was banned from overthinking, which is obviously very vague and easier said than done. That's why I made 2 specific rules that I would stick to for that entire week. Rule number 1. Use simple colors. Any piece of clothing or hair or skin would only have its base color and a shadow, and that's it. No halftones, no nothing. I wanted to keep it simple so that I wouldn't strain my brain too much. Rule number 2. No blending, no blurring. I actually do like the mix of having soft and hard shadows, but it always, and I mean always, makes me overthink everything. So no more of that, not this week. The only slight exception to it that I made was allowing myself to use a soft brush to add a gradient and maybe extra effects if I needed to. But nothing related to the actual shadows, that's banned for now. And then, as I was in bed trying to fall asleep and I was thinking of who I should draw, ideally I wanted all the characters to be from the same franchise because I wouldn't have to switch between referencing different art styles all the time. I was thinking of anime with bigger casts, and I know there's like a lot of them, but I'm the kind of person who tends to like 1 or 2 much more than the rest. And then a nostalgia train hit me out of nowhere. Nostalgic to the very thing you can see on screen, obviously. To be perfectly honest and transparent, I'm not even that much of a Vocaloid fan. I don't think I even count as a fan at all. The last time I listened to a Vocaloid song was probably at an anime convention back in high school, which was like 7 years ago. And even at the time, I was never particularly drawn to it. I don't think it's bad music, it's just not really my vibe. Though I will say that there used to be some songs that once I found the translations of seemed really interesting in the story they were telling. I have some vague memories of enjoying the Daughter of Evil series, I think that's what it was called. But my personal opinion on Vocaloids wasn't the reason I decided to go for them this week. Like I said, it was a nostalgia. Because while I may not have been the biggest fan, I was still a weeb attending conventions in 2010s. I don't know how it was anywhere else in the world, but where I grew up, Vocaloids were a huge thing at cons. You would have panels where it's just a random guy playing songs from YouTube and people would be vibing there, or dance-offs where they would play the videos where the Vocaloids were dancing and people would compete to see who can imitate them best, like Jazz Dance but with YouTube videos, because we didn't have Jazz Dance with Vocaloids. You had cosplayers everywhere. There were whole events themed around Vocaloids. A lot of people from my friends group, particularly the people I met at these conventions, were into Vocaloids, and they would sometimes organize these things that they would meet together and gather a bunch of other people at cons, and they would teach the Vocaloid dances to them. And then you'd have a fairly large group of people dancing to it. I don't know, to Luca Night Fever or Bad Apple. And I was a part of these people too, because it was genuinely fun and I always loved dancing. I was actually quite good at learning dance moves from videos my entire life. And a few times it was that my friends would ask me to learn a specific dance so that I could teach it to them and to the other people. And I did. Those weren't official panels, so I wasn't an actual instructor, but there was one time when I would teach, I think it was Bad Apple, to a group of like 35 people, and I was, I think, 16 at the time, or 15. My friends always paid me in snacks and stuff, which for a teenager was a great deal overall. And it wasn't always just the Vocaloid dances, or at least I don't think it was Vocaloids. I was attending cons from a fairly young age, and it was around that time that these dance videos from Nico Nico Doga started popping off on YouTube, at least in my country. I don't know if it's still a thing now. I still go to conventions now, and I don't really see these types of spontaneous girl activities anymore, but maybe I just don't know where to look. The point I'm trying to make is, after that nostalgia train hit me while I was in bed, I had to go on and draw it. There was no resisting the pull. Drawing Luca was surprisingly, maybe not easy, but comforting. I knew it wouldn't be perfect because I did no practice whatsoever and only used an old official art as a reference, so I had to come up with the style on my own. You could probably see it on screen, how I struggled with her head, but overall, I had so much fun with her pose and with using the bright colors, everything really. And she didn't take that long either. The moment I finished her, I wanted to pick up my tablet again and draw. In the previous weeks, while I was always at least satisfied with my drawings, I was also always so exhausted by the end of each piece. I needed to rest for the next day or so. I had to put my tablet away and lie down and just rest. But not this time. No, this week, after I just finished Luca, I wanted to draw the next piece right away. I didn't, because it was 2 a.m. and I decided to be a responsible adult who gets some sleep before work, but the feeling itself was amazing and was exactly what I needed at that time. Literally every day after that was the same. I was sketching and doing line art and coloring, and every time I would finish, I just wanted to keep going. It wasn't possible because being a member of society means having responsibilities, and being a human means my energy is pretty limited. But I still ended up drawing for 2 hours each day until I was finished with all the pieces I told myself I would finish. By the way, I didn't do that with Luca, but for the other 3, as you could probably see, whenever the background color turns red, I was just searching for all the spots where the bucket tool didn't reach. I know there is an easier way to do it, or probably a few of them, but to be honest, it was just very calming and it was like a break after having to think of all the poses and colors, so I didn't really mind. Simplicity was the motto for these drawings, and I was fully prepared to have to live with the weight of my own failures, but I will say that I was very positively surprised about how good they turned out. Because I was only using references for the designs, which were taken from the official illustrations from years ago when they were first published, and for the hands. But the faces, the eyes, the poses themselves, that's all me. It's as close to my own art style as it could possibly get at the time, and it honestly looks decent even now, I think. There were obviously some difficulties too, because there have to be some every single time, that's just life. With Luca, it was her face. It was the part of her I spent the most time on, and I think it's because I spent so much on it on the first day that the other 3 pieces were much easier in that regard, and the head proportions practice I did in week 5 helped a lot too. My problems with Rin were pretty much of the same nature as they were with Len. One was that there really isn't much color variation to them. I mean, there is, but at least to my eyes, yellow and white kind of blend into the same color. It's obviously an exaggeration. I can tell the difference between yellow and white. It's just, they're close enough. Please tell me I'm not the only one. So yeah, I was getting slightly frustrated with that. And then the other problem was that they both have short hair, which left me with these very awkward empty spaces of the background that I just didn't know how to cover up. I could just make them bigger, but then the consistency would be lost across the 4 drawings, and I would have to rework some parts of them, so I just chose the lesser of the 2 evils and left it as it was. It doesn't look too bad, it's just, I don't know, meh. Also, I still feel no shame whatsoever over using Rin's sketch to get a matching lens pose. When I say I'm gonna keep it easy, I'm gonna keep it easy. Now, with Miku, the biggest problem was the pose, or the clothes, or both. I knew some of it would be hidden behind the hair, but like, Luca's pose wasn't all that different from Miku's, kind of, but it was different enough that I could add some shadows to make it look interesting. But here, she was really just standing there, nothing too interesting, nothing too complicated, and I still struggled with getting the upper part of her body right. To be honest, the best thing about her pose was literally the hand, which is ironic because it's usually the one thing I hate the most. So yeah. Another thing, it does irk me off that Miku is the only one with a non-blue background, but it just wouldn't fit for her. I did try it once, and maybe you can even see it in the time-lapse, but the colors were just too similar with the background and the hair, so I left it as pink. And there you have it, the 4 horsemen of my early anime convention days. Oh, the nostalgia. These 4 drawings were the break from studying that I really needed at the time, and if anyone else is also feeling like burning out from too much practice, even though it's still just practice and you're not at the level you want to be, I do highly recommend drawing something easy just for the sheer fun of it. It doesn't have to be good. These 4 are good, but they're not good, if you know what I mean. So yeah, try it out. Now, the comparison time to week 1. I'm not gonna do it. It's a break time week, it can be different, I don't really care. The comparisons wouldn't even make sense that much because these aren't my OCs, so I can't compare them to my OCs. It's fan art, but it's the simple, no blending, barely any shading kind of fan art, which is very different from everything else that I've drawn so far. So I'm just gonna leave it like that. Other comparisons that are actually important and make sense are at the end of every other video in this series, so if anyone's interested in how my art improved, you can go check out weeks 1 to 5, or literally just the last few minutes of each video if you don't want to sit through all of them. And that wraps everything up. Thank you for watching and listening to my nostalgia rambling, and I will get back to more focused kind of practice in week 7. Bye!